Halt! Foul mutant! You dare to disgrace the Emperor's holy light with your malignant presence. In the name of the Golden Throne, I will smite thee! What are you on about, you overgrown tin can looking thing, yeah? I ain't no mutant. I am the king of the Votann. Yeah, we two-legged, no-thinking, 8-foot-tall, chainsaw-wielding, bag of brainless, hyper-religious, genetically augmented, enhanced super soldier. What? I'm a space dwarf. Yeah, you tell him, Finny. We're space dwarfs. Ach, for ancestors' sake, Clarence, I told you to stay inside the damn van. Is that abominable into by the Primarch, words are difficult. Is that a robot? Ah, shite. No. Salutations Rangers, General Bradley 101 back at you again with some more lore. And in today's videos, boys and gals, we go back to the grim darkness of the far future of the 41st millennium, because today we're looking at the resurgent Squats, or rather their new name, the Leagues of Votann. So, what exactly are the Leagues of Votann? Well, they're space dwarfs. And you'll be thinking, it sure did take GW a long time to introduce space dwarfs? I mean, I thought they were around since the 80s. Well, you see, space dwarves were indeed a thing. And we're gonna start off this video by addressing the giant mining drill in the room here. They were previously known as the Squats, which were released in the first and second editions of Warhammer 40k, way back when in the 80s. And they had a lot of old lore, but they were one of the rare cases where they had such a loving fan base, yet GW just decided to discontinue them. I mean, it was so much so that when GW removed a model or removed a piece of lore or retconned anything, it became known as GW squatted the lore, because they squatted the Squats. There's a whole bunch of old lore which we won't be covering because it's old lore, obviously, but I can cover it in a different video if you guys want. Let me know down below. Do you want old Squat lore, like a Squat retrospective? But basically, GW said, oh yeah, the Tyrannids just rolled up and killed everything and devoured everything. They still exist technically in, like, you know, the Imperium, but they're just gone. And as you can imagine, people were not really too happy about having the Space Dwarf just gone. But Space Orc is fine, Space Elf is fine, but no, the Space Dwarf is a bit too silly. GW doesn't make sense more oftentimes than not. But GW has rectified their mistake and brought us back the glorious, amazing, wonderful Space Dwarf in the form of the Leagues of Votann.
One wrong put right.
And yeah, they're definitely way better than they once were, though I do miss the land train, but that's just me. Anywho, so that's the whole big mining drill in the room. Just a little out of lore reasons why as to they came back and why it's such a momentous thing. That's your outer world context, but let's get into the nitty gritty mining business of the Squats and talk about their lore. First thing first, let's talk about their history. So, what are the Squats exactly? Well, the Squats are cloned species of abhumans, to put it mildly. They are genetically augmented and changed, though not like the Space Marines where they're baseline humans that are further augmented. Rather, they are genetic profiles that have been augmented and that are artificially grown and created, known as clone skins, or clone skins, depending on how Norse you want to be about it. So, the reason why they're genetically cloned is because way back when, during pre-Imperial Terror, during the Dark Age of Technology, which the Votann refer to as the Age of Myth, a lot of their origin is surrounded in myth. And when we get to the culture part of this, I'll touch on this a little bit more, but the Squats are very sensible in 40k. Which is a very odd thing. But anyway, so their original purpose were mining fleets. They would be sent in massive sublight ships known as the Long March ships, just like how colonists were sent on them. But these were sent with the express purpose of mining the raw materials of the galactic core. Now the galactic core is interesting in that it is quite hazardous, in that there's a lot of nonsense going on where it'll be gravitomic storms, sunbeams, suns exploding, all that type of nonsense. But it's very untouched, and because it's untouched, it's incredibly rich. And due to the nature of the gravitonic compression and all that nonsense, it forms very unique and specialized alloys and materials and whatnot. So very valuable, but very difficult to get. So what the ancestors of the Votann originally did, and they were known as the first ancestors. Surprising, I know, but they were sent in these massive ships and they established colonies in the inner core, and these colonies became known as holds, which came to continue to refer to what the Squats Well, I'm going to use Squats and Votann interchangeably here, so don't get it twisted. What the Squats determined as their homes, the holds, and a hole could be anything, but again, we'll touch more on that later. And they were joined by what are known as the Ironkin. Now, the Ironkin are robots. They're AI robots, and they are not subservient. They are treated and created as full-on, fully fledged humans. Well, you know what I mean. And they were created by the Votann. Now, the Votann were these massive things known as ancestor cores. The terms are used interchangeably. And they are giant, massive AI subcomputers that also produce STCs. Now, STCs are known as standard template constructs. Basically, it's like, it's like a 3D printer that knows everything. You give it like some wheat and it'll turn it into bread, basically. Now, these massive AI constructs were everything. They held all the knowledge, they held all the recipes, they were basically there to help the colonists get going. And what's interesting is that in the mythos of the Votann is not the name of the ancestor cores, these massive AI constructs. Rather, the massive AI constructs are named after a mysterious figure from the past during the time of the first ancestors. Now, as to what Votann or who Votann was, they don't really know. They say that maybe he was the first ever leader of the first ever colony. Perhaps he was the chap who got everything together. Maybe it was a particular AI. We don't really know. But regardless, whoever Votann was, or whatever Votann was, it was very important to the early success of the colonies in the deep core. So the massive AI cores or ancestor cores were named after Votann in his honor, and the Leagues of Votann then take their name as well from that. So we have these massive colonies that are mining and trading and sending resources back to Terra and across the interstellar human empire. But then, the AI rebellion happens, as well as, the time of strife, old night, and they get separated from the wider humanity. So they grow, develop, and mature on their own, continuing to mine and trade amongst themselves, and in some cases outside, because their technology did not degrade nearly as bad as the Imperium's. Like, compared to the Imperium, they are significantly more advanced. They are I think they're on the same par as the Tau, but they hold some stuff that's even better than the Tau. It's like a weird mix of, in terms of technology, of like the Eldari and the Tau, where they have modern tech that surpasses like the Tau, yet they still have some very old school, deadly ancient nonsense like the Eldar. And the reason why is because they were colonists. And since they were colonists in the deep core, while they exported a hell of a lot of stuff, they didn't get that many imports because it was dangerous. So they had to be self-reliable and self-determined. And that plays a massive impact on their culture and why they were able to maintain what they had, because unlike other colonies where they relied on imports, the Votann were completely self-sufficient and were able to thrive in the deep core. Now, how did the Votann get reintroduced back in the galaxy? Simple. Abaddon the Omnis over there decided to chuck a giant black rock at Cadia and blow it up. Rip Cadia. And that caused, the Great Rift. And a lot of holds got displaced. Obviously, having demons just suddenly falling from the sky, the market value tends to go down a bit. So they end up venturing outside of the core even more. Now, they did venture outside of the core throughout the thousands of years that exist in what are known as prospects. These were hybrid military / pioneer fleets / trade guilds. And they would often serve as mercenaries or traders or explorators throughout the galaxy. But it really kicked off during the Great Rift, where we have entire holds, entire kindreds, entire leagues moving out and settling outside of the deep core, right? Because big massive explosion with raiding demons. They normally either came back or established outposts outside, but now we have entire leagues, entire giant structures settling outside of the galactic core, which the kin refer to as far space, by the way. And that brings us up to date with the modern history of the leagues. They are reintroduced into the galaxy, they're out and about, mulling, trading, fighting, doing all the typical nonsense that you expect space dwarfs to do. Now, let's talk a little bit about the culture of the leagues. So, first thing first, the Leagues of Votann. Let's get the naming out right. Originally, they were the Long March ships, as we talked about. So what would happen is these individual ships would come together and form, groups, and these groups eventually became what are known as a kindred. Now, a kindred can be anything from like a few vessels, or maybe even like 1 or 2 vessels, all the way up to like hundreds of thousands of kin. It really does depend. But the way that it works is these many kindreds come together to form what is known as a league. And there's only one requirement to form a league, and that's to have a Votann or an ancestor core. And that particular ancestor core is what is centered around the particular league. Now, the reason why people came around Votann is because, one, obviously a Votann is this massive, important thing. So what the different kindreds would do originally is that they would form military alliances to, hey, we need to protect this. And obviously, when you're all alone in the deep core, you need that sense of unity together, because fighting is fruitless. And that's really, a lot of the kin culture comes from that idea of, hey, we're all alone here, we need to stick together. Which is why civil wars in the Votann are unheard of. Like, you can count the amount of major civil conflicts and revolts on like one, maybe two hands throughout their thousands of years history. Now, obviously, they have the little border disputes and like mining rights here and there, but those are usually easily resolved. And the kin, like, fighting against your fellow kin is pretty much a sin. Like, it rarely ever happens. And the idea of the kin is that you are family. Your fellow Votann is family. It doesn't matter where their kindred is from. Obviously, you're closer to that kindred, but a Votann, a kindred, a kin, they are family. It doesn't matter who, where, or what they're from. They are your first allegiance. And that's really interesting, where the sense of unity amongst the Votann is unparalleled. And that extends to how they interact with other people. The Votann will never, under any circumstance, ever do anything that could remotely place any kindred in danger or compromise the interests. They will never ever jeopardize the safety or interests of their other kin or prior agreements for their own benefit. They are incredibly selfless, which is, again, this is Warhammer 40k, very rare. And as we continue with their culture, the individual idea of duty is paramount among the kin, because on those long march colony ships, if you were lazy, it was just a little leak, I patched up later, that leak could then expand and compromise the entire system, and the ship would be destroyed. And that funnels into their idea that the kin believe in working hard and playing hard. But because they're so hardworking and so determined, and how they do not waste, like, wasting is a sin. You don't waste anything, you put it, you document it, you store it correctly, and then you carry on. People often see them as like greedy hoarders, but that is completely not the case. Now, obviously, there is the old thing with dwarfs, they like this stuff, but they keep it because they believe, hey, we are putting time and energy into this, we need to do it properly. You do something right, or you don't do it at all. That's the mindset of the kin. And you would think, okay, personal greed and ambition must be a thing. It's like, no, it's completely absent. Unlike the Imperium, where it's like, what can I do for myself? The Votann are very much like, hey, I need to do this for my kin, right? Again, the idea that we are doing this so that the kin can survive. If anything bad happens, we have this massive stockpile reserve to put us through the time. So personal ventures are indeed a thing, but that personal venture will never ever compromise the kin. It will never compromise the hold, it will never compromise the Votann at large. And it's the idea of, one, family, but two, the idea that the ancestors are watching. And the ancestors are watching are one of the many truths of the Votann. So the Votann have these old sayings and truths, but they're idiosyncratic, so they can be used in multiple ways. It could be used as a battle cry, for instance, the ancestors are watching, or it could be used as a warning. It's like, hey, the ancestors are watching you. And it's reassuring. It's like, don't worry, the ancestors are watching. And it's the idea that this particular kin, this particular individual, your duty is not only to do good by your people and your peers, but you have to match or exceed the duty and the things done by your predecessors, by your ancestors. And this is actually very, very similar to the Romans, in fact. You were not only competing with your peers, but your ancestors. The idea that whatever your ancestor did, you had to succeed it, you had to surpass it to be a good heir. And the reason why that happened was because your family lineage would never regress, it would always progress forward. And while, Dwarves, Scottish, Vikings, Norse, all that nonsense, the Votann actually claim a lot of Roman and Greek influence, which I'm actually really up for. It's very nice seeing GW take a very different route, but a different route that works. Like, don't get me wrong, they're very much Norse and Scottish and all that nonsense, but they still hold some Roman influence to them. So that's the kin. Like, your duty is to protect your family, to protect your kin, your people, as well as to go beyond it. So there are 4 main pillars to the society of the Votann, and it sums it up perfectly with this quote. By the mysteries of the crucible are they given form and strength. By the molten fires and pounding pistons of the forge are they armed and armored. By the Votann and the Fane are they given wisdom and purpose. And by the searing wrath of the hearth are they filled with the fury to overcome any foe. Now, those are the 4 pillars. So each pillar is both a physical place, but also it holds some symbolism. So the first thing first is that in each hold there will be what is known as the hearth. Now, the hearth is essentially anything. It's a fire that burns at the center. It could be anything. It could be a giant plasma reactor. It could be a small sun. It could be a massive furnace. The idea is that it's the central power point to the hold. It's the hearth. And there's a common saying where it says that, the only time a hearth will go out is if every kin is dead. And when you hear that, you think, okay, that's very esoteric and sentimental, but it actually fills back into the idea that the plasma reactor, the furnace, whatever it is, it'll only go out if there's no one left to refuel it. So it will only be extinguished if every last member dies. So each kindred has a hold, by the way, and then multiple holds make up a league. Just wanted to clarify that. So they have the second pillar, which is the forge. Now the forge is where the Brokia. Now the Brokia are the engineering class. Now the Votann don't have any hierarchical class. It's not like the Tau. This is just, the engineers. You call them the Brokia. Now this is where they craft weapons, tools, equipment. Now this could be anything. It could be a conventional factory. It could be a giant ship. It could be, a hollowed out asteroid. When it comes to like the physical places of holds and ships, it literally anything. You could have a man-made ring of planets. It could be an asteroid belt. It could be a giant spaceship. It does not matter. But the forge is the industrial center. The third pillar then we have is the Fane, which is where the living ancestors reside. So the living ancestors are also known as Grimnir, which are the psychers of the Votann. And it's very interesting because part of the genetical augmentation of the kin, besides them being able to see faster, be more durable, be stronger, they also have a less presence in the warp, much like the Tau. And this was done primarily, it's believed by the kin, to reduce the corruption and the draw of the demons. And it works because chaotic corruption is unheard of. The Votann do not fall to chaos. They are they're pretty much uncorruptible, like dwarves. But this is where the living ancestors, the Grimnir, this is where the ancestor core resides. The Votann, this is the Fane. So if this particular kindred has an ancestor core, that's where it lies. If not, that's just where the Grimnir and their knowledge and the history and the culture lies. It's a cultural center, basically. And then we get to the Crucible. Now, the Crucible is the final area, and that's where the cloning happens, where the artificial wombs are, to ensure that the kindred continue as a people. Now, these are ancient devices, which, have been around since the colony ships, and they are defended by the sworn orders of the Embrya. The Embrya is, like I said, it's the class that tends to the Crucible and the genetic augmentations and whatnot. So we see that each of those 4 pillars represent something about the kindred. You have the heart, which is the power center. You have the forge, which is an industrial center. You have the Fane, which is the cultural center. And you have the Crucible, which is quite literally the origin of the Votann. That's where you get the kin, the physical people. Now, what's interesting about Votann society is that it's divided into 3 main categories. You have the economic, you have the military, and then you have the cultural aspect. They are quite literally the closest thing 40k has to a modern sci-fi universe. They have standing professional armies. Thing is, as a standing army, you have a life outside. Like, you will go on tours of duty and be stationed in defensible outposts, but you get rotated and you get come back to your family. While the primarily way that they are genetically cloned is how they reproduce, they are still fully capable of organic reproduction. And given how they treat the Ironkin, it's not far to assume that any offspring of the Votann born naturally, which I assume that there are some, it isn't made clear in the lore, but 2 and 2 makes 4. They'll be treated just as equally well as the Ironkin. So, a little more on the Ironkin. The Ironkin are AI robots. They can think for themselves, they have a personality. Now, it's not as advanced as a normal human in that they have no desire to lead. They have no real, while they have a personality, they don't really have any personal ambitions. Their personal ambition is simply put to make sure that everyone around them is happy, to make sure that the kin grows. It's like that one friend who's like, what do you want to do? Is like, I just want to, live a normal life. I want to have a family. I want to grow up together. I want to make sure I have a good job. I want to take care of my friends. They're very nice people. And they are further supported by what are known as cog robots. Now, cog robots are very different from Ironkin in that cog robots are literally like servitors, minus the human brain and whatnot. They are completely and utterly expendable. Whereas the Ironkin are seen as family. You treat them as you would treat your family because they are family. They are Ironkin compared to the kin. As I said, the three main parts of the kin structure are the economic, the military, and the cultural. So the economic is primarily made up of guilds. So what are guilds? They're essentially corporations, like modern day corporations. Multiple kins make up guilds. So mining expeditions, you have mining guilds, you have trading guilds, and it's typical nonsense in regarding to companies. They have bickerings, they have, little debates here and there. But unlike modern day companies, the idea of the ruthlessness is kind of just lost, because at the end of the day, these are kin. Like there's very much competition in there, but it's all respectable and healthy. Sometimes it does tend up, poking over a little bit, but it's always very much regulated. Like it never ever runs out of control. You will never ever have like kin fighting and killing other kin over like resources. Like there will always be like some way to find out, and if there is a little skirmish, it's quickly sorted out and ruled over. So more often than not, guilds can be inside of a league, or they can be outside of a league, or they can be in between a league, but not everyone has to be part of a guild. You have independent mining units that are known as freelancers or trading units, and there's kind of a little bit of a rivalry between the two. The guilders, as they're called, see the freelancers as just rogues who want to do whatever they want and who lack the true core and safety that a guild can provide, whereas the freelancers see the guilds as stiff-necked and just buckled down, that want to follow rules and all nonsense. So it's very healthy and very well. And then the second aspect is the military. The senior officers, like I said, the military is a modern military in sci-fi. You get recruited, you get tours of duty, you get assigned to what are known as oath bands, but we'll touch a little bit more when we talk about the warfare of the kindred. And you have a home life. You could be a regular kin dude, right? And you could have a wife and a kid, and your wife works as, I don't know, a farmer or more often than not a clerk at the local trade center, and you can go out for a tour and come back, and hey, it's quite literally that. Now the league do have militia, so basically when a league is under attack, there will indeed be the idea that hey, everyone needs to take up arms and fight, but the league does have a civilian class that's purely civilian. Now, granted, they are very small compared to our modern day, humanity, because, 40k, you have to fight, but they do exist. And it's that idea that, hey, the military is the military and the civilian is the civilian. While there is overlap, it's very much regulated and, well, in my opinion, very good and appropriate. And the last one is the Grimnir, or the cultural center. The Grimnir are the living ancestors. They're called that because they're ancient. They are several hundred, and the oldest being thousands of years old. And like I said, they're the old man who knows everything and who tells stories. They are the historians, the cultural experts. Like, if you want to learn about where you come from, you go to a Grimnir. And as I said before, they have a lot of Greco-Roman influence, and this is particularly shown in what is known as a Spankarunde, or the Hearthspake. Now, the Hearthspake is essentially a giant auditorium where the ruling guild masters, the senior military officials, and the cunning Grimnir, basically all of the leaders of the Votann, come together and they just debate about what? Anything. They have massive familial bonds and they're just there to talk and discuss. But the idea of this debate is not to get you to change your mind. These are dwarves and they are stubborn as all hell. It's very much a type of senate, but getting a dwarf to change your mind is like really difficult. Like, for example, Gilliman could change the mind of a dwarf, but it's Gilliman. He's a Primarch. They are very rare. So the idea is not to change, it's to share opinions and to adapt and debate and, to understand one another. And it always ends up with, hey, agree to disagree. And these sessions could last for days. And, they have breaks. Let's go and have some lunch together. Let's go and do this together. Then we come back and debate. It's very much like that idea of the discussion in the Senate. But unlike Greco-Roman senates, the idea of self-interesting or political maneuvering is completely absent. Like, the kin may be hard-headed, but they are completely earnest and honest in their desire to guide the kindred well. Like, the reason why they are so dead set on doing this particular thing is because they truly believe deep in their hearts that this is the best way to do it. And as I said, these are the main leaders from the three main spears. So as I said, we have the guilds, right? The guilds are the main economic standpoint. And there is one thing I want to talk about. There are usually very relaxed, but the particular guilds that are the most crazy are the the Chthonian mining guilds. Now these lads, properly dense dwarf. These guys are lunatics, but in a good way. They mine the most dangerous things, like, hey, let's mine this star that's near going to explode. And what they do is that they will actually volunteer for surgical augmentation to replace their cybernetic limbs, or, you know, replace their particular blood with a viscous fluid. Like they're crazy. Like hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z, yeah? So let's just do whatever we need to do to get it done. But the guilds in of themselves are purely civilian employment based. And like, hey, you may have a military dude working as a guild when he's not on rotation, but when he gets called to rotation, he goes and do it. Like I said, it's very foreign to like 40k fans, because they're like, no, they're actually like proper sci-fi modern day. Like, you know, they're like, we could live there. Like the standard of living as a kin is so astronomically high compared to the other people. Their standard of living is on par with like some Eldar and like Ultramar. Like it's really good standard of living. So to wrap up on the culture, what the kin believe and what the Votann and the Squats believe is that you are family because, one, you are either born to us as blood or you've done something to earn that right to be called family. Granted, what you have to do is pretty big, but once you earn the dwarf's trust, he will die by your side giving his last breath so long as it doesn't hurt his family. The idea is that, hey, we do really, really, really hard work and we will never waste anything, but that's because it's better for our family to have this because they can do more with it. You know, they work hard, they party hard, and at the end of the day, while it takes a lot to get to be their friend, once you are indeed their friend, they will never abandon you. So long as you continue to protect the kin with them, they will never abandon you. They're the most invaluable allies that you could ever have. They're dwarfs. You know, they're hard-headed and stubborn, but at the end of the day, they're stubborn not out of a sense of arrogance or pride, and like the Eldar, they're stubborn in a sense of, I need to do this. I need to serve my family and to make them well for my ancestors, for everyone around me. Now granted, they're not infallible, you know, they're still, well, quote unquote human, but their flaws don't come from a place of, you know, arrogance or conceitedness or self-greed. It's more of, hey, I know you're trying to do what's right, and you know, what worked in the past will work in the future, but a little more nuance would really benefit the kin. But I mean, it's in 40k, so nuance in 40k is non-existent. So I don't blame the kin whatsoever. But to sum up, dwarf good, elf bad, repub if hate elf. Now, how exactly do the League function with the other races? Quite simple, really. They despise orcs. Orcs are their most hated enemy. They orcs die. Because the orcs are the exact opposite of the League. They don't really care about one another that much, and they are incredibly wasteful. I mean, the League had something called the 500 Years War, where a certain orc empire by the name of Morkbork's Empire of Scrap, quality orc name, and the kin of the Grand Orion Compact lasted 500 years because the Votann was actually destroyed by the orcs in an assault. And the Votann were like, yep, nope, you have chosen death. And they spent 500 years annihilating every single spore. Like, there is no trace of that whatsoever. Yeah, the Votann, you don't mess with Space Dwarf. So they despise orcs. They despise Chaos and the Necrons and the Tyranids as well. Chaos because they see them as stupid. It's like, why are you doing this? What purpose is there? This is not helping anyone at all. Because like I said, the idea of personal gratification to a Votann, no. Your own personal stuff does not matter unless the family aspect, the kin, is being fulfilled. So they see Chaos with a healthy mix of curiosity, but not curiosity in the sense as, ooh, what is this? As why the hell do you even bother? And sheer utter disgust. Necrons,
Spooky, scary skeletons.
They don't like the Necrons because every time, ooh, fancy new thing, and they start mining. Next thing, a Skelly Boy wakes up and then it's like, you know,
Buenos dias, fuck boy!
So they don't like them for that, and they don't like the Tyranids because, well, who doesn't like the Tyranids? They're known as the Bane, and an interesting story about them is that a Tyranid high fleet overwhelmed a league, but that particular league, the Votann wasn't touched. Everyone else died, but the Votann wasn't touched because, well, it's metal. Tyranids don't really care. So what happened is that the Votann had such a backlash The Votann is AI, by the way. I'm thinking I mentioned it, but the idea of seeing all of its kin, its family die, drove it mad. So now it just exists, screaming the psychic shockwaves, warning other Votann not to come there. So it's basically a warning, like saying, hey, this area is bad, don't come here. We then come to the Eldar and the Tau. Now, the Eldar is interesting because, like, they do trade with the dwarves, but the dwarves and the elves, they hate each other. But it's like, they don't hate each other enough to actually fight because, you know, they haven't done anything that bad, but they're like, ugh, dwarf. And the dwarves are like, ugh, elf. But like, hey, here's that what stuff if you want. It's like, okay, here's your money, bye. It's like more begrudging than anything else, though some certain Eldar and some certain Votann have managed to actually form close alliances, but those are far rarer. And the Tau, well, yeah, the Tau are pretty okay, minus the Ethereals and their mind control, but the Tau are pretty sane, the Votann are pretty sane, so yeah, they form alliances and pacts here there. Now, the big one, the Imperium of Man. Now, the Imperium of Man is the Votann's closest ally, but they're not overall unified and aligned because two things. Number one, a bunch of Inquisitors and ultra zealous chapters, I love the Black Templars, believe the kin to be Xenos or mutants and to be purged totally and utterly. And second is the Admech, because the Admech and the Imperium despise AI, and Votann, well, their literal shit is a giant AI construct, so if the mechanics find out about that, well, let's say you're going to have about 17,000 different crusades with Mr. Beep Boop Bop destroy the AI. So, also, forgot to mention, when it comes to outsiders, the Votann, not a peep. They don't like discussing matters with the outsiders. For a Votann to discuss with you, you have to become kin, family, and that is incredibly difficult. Partly because if the Imperium understands that the Votann have AI, they'll destroy them flat out, period, because it's such a thing. Though, again, some people like Gilliman and Ultramar and more of the reserved elements of the Imperium are very friendly with the Votann because Imperial Guard especially, they love the Guard, and certain Space Marine chapters, because, you know, like I said, the more reserved elements are like, hey, you know, you guys are okay, you guys are cool, but there's no official alliances that we know of, like officially canon. There is that thing of, oh yeah, the leagues have alliances here and there, but there's no exact details. So yeah, also, Dark Eldar, they hate the Dark Eldar. I mean, who doesn't hate the Dark Eldar? They're okay with clowns, they don't really like clowns because they're like tricky and they speak in rhymes, and they're like, god damn it, just, you know,
Speak.
Right, so that's how they are viewed by other species and how they view other species. As I mentioned earlier, they have something called truths. Now, truths are two things. Number one, the first truths are undeniable things that they know about their history and origins. One of the truths is that, hey, we came here on vast colony ships. Also, they don't want the Imperium to realize that they have origins from Terra, because then the Imperium will do the Imperium thing and claim them as part of their empire, and then, yeah, that's, you know what, yeah, no, that's bad. It's very bad. But other truths are just expressions of conservative stuff. They're also very conservative people because, as I said, it comes from them being on these massive colony ships. If you try something new and that new thing ends up breaking, well, everyone's dead. So they're very, very conservative, and that fits in with the dwarf aspect of being conservative and, you know, like, hey, you don't try new things, do what works. They do innovate, but their innovation takes a long time to, like, come right. So, you know, they're dwarves, you know, dwarves. So some of their notable truths are, it's kin. It's an expression used to indicate something of or belonging to the kin race, and therefore it's inherently durable or reliable. We were talking about the ancestors are watching. Another one is the void is in our veins. What that means is they're starfarers. It's an expression that it's like, hey, can you fly? It's like, of course I can. The void's in my veins. And then one of my favorites is luck has, need keeps, toil earns. Now, this is an expression that exists that those who work the hardest to attain something and can prove the greatest need of it, they deserve to have it regardless of the cost to those who lose it. Now, this comes to like one of the negative aspects, well, I guess negative aspects of the kin is that if they see like the Imperium and an Imperial world and it's just, it is like this dude does not care about output, like it's just horribly done, they'll be like, hey, no, they'll swoop in and they'll claim the world as their own. Unless they have an existing contract with that particular planet, it's like, yeah, you know, you're not choosing this. Like, this is ours. Like, we're taking this is ours because you guys are just wasting it. Now, what will happen under that is that two things will happen. One, worlds end up defecting because, like I said, the Votann are just significantly better than, you know, the Imperium. Or what can happen is that they'll just mine what they want, take it, and then just leave. It really does depend. But yeah, you know, they despise seeing people being wasteful, especially. So, you know, their lore is still very new. So it's very good, but a lot of it, we just have to see them interact. We haven't had any big major stories. And another interesting thing here is that the kin, in terms of naming, they have two names. The first name is a given name, so your surname and whatnot, but the second is a chosen name where you get to choose your own name, in fact. This is done at birth. The only difference is that with the Ironkin, they're permitted to choose both names. And it's very interesting to see that, hey, they really do see them as, individuals. And that's interesting because individuality is highly prized in the sense that each kin has some control over their own destiny. Thus, in most cases, the kin's chosen name is something they select themselves, and they're free to change it however they want. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. The kin are first and foremost a mercantilistic society. They want to make a deal, they want to make a thing. So it's very much kind of like Venice and like Genoa, like the trading empires of the Italians in the 14th, 15th, 16th century. They make deals first and foremost, though unlike Venice, damn fucking Venetians, they will never ever let their desire for material overwhelm their morality. Again, very different for 40k, but it's interesting. Finishing up with how they interact with their place in the galaxy is that they have something where they're known as far space. Far space, as I said earlier, is the idea of the space outside the core, and they have these massive fleets known as prospects. They are militarized expeditions made up of the Hernkin. Now, the Hernkin are the pioneers. They are the first ever people to be sent out beforehand. So if a Votann wants to explore a new area or colonize a new area, whatever, the Hernkin are the pioneers, the rangers, the frontiersmen. They go ahead and they set up the idea, and they take a great pride in that. So these prospect fleets usually go out as mercenaries or trading units, and their idea is that, hey, let's go and learn about the world and bring it back to the Votann to deposit knowledge into it, because their idea is that they're serving the kindred by finding out more about the universe that they live in. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's not uncommon to have wholesale Votann establishing themselves in and around different areas. One major example is the Ironheads of Necromunda, which are descendants of a League of Votann prospect that aided in the reconstruction of that particular hive world after, the Horus Heresy. Now, let's talk about the warfare of the Leagues. Now, the primarily unit of the League is known as an Oath Band. Now, that Oath Band could be anything really. It's a very flexible formation. That could be an oath band of armor or infantry or whatever. There's no really hard numbers because it varies so much. So that oath band then gets combined into what is known as a kin host. Now the kin host is the major army system. Like multiple kin hosts come together to form, a kin army. A kin host is an army basically. Now the primarily unit is made up of the Hearthkin. Now the Hearthkin is the basic foot infantry. They are clad in void armor, which if you are aware, my Solar Auxilia lovers be very happy right now, is that yes, this is indeed the same type of void armor used by the Solar Auxilia. It's not the exact same, but it's similar in its uses. And they are armed with bolters, standard or Volkite or plasma beam weaponry. Like they are very advanced, very hard to kill, and the idea is that no kin is ever expendable. Like I said, it's modern day military, even better than modern day military if you think about it, but that's neither here nor there. And they are supported by the Hernkin, which are, the fast movers. They're armed with bikes and whatnot, as well as the Brokia, which are the heavy weapons. These are the heavy artillery units and the heavy armor units. Then we have the Hearthguard. Now the Hearthguard are the elite units. They're kind of like, they're clad in exo armor, kind of like Terminators, but they are the elite of the elite that are used to guard the hearth. Surprising absolutely no one. Not going too much into detail in terms of the warfare because they'll have their own separate video, but the kin hosts are commanded by a call, and then you get something called the Votannic Council, which is made up of a high call, a living ancestor, and a Brokia master engineer. So as I said, the Votannic Council is what will lead a Votann army. So you have the main military man, you have the main engineer dude, and then you have the main psychic man. All fits together nice and well. It's very flexible and it works really well. Good job, Dwarfs. DORF. Now, let's start in the main leagues. So, these are the main playable leagues, just a light overview. They'll have their own episode. This video is getting long as is, and I love me some Dwarf, but I still have to put this out in an acceptable time frame. So first thing first, we have the Greater Thurian League. Now, these are the main Votann in terms of appearance. They are uncompromisingly mercenary. They are driven by exploration and military conquest and resource acquisition. Their main thing is they boast scores of inexhaustible ranks of kin-host warriors. They take pride in all this, epitomizing what it is to be kin. So not only is it one of the original founding leagues, it's one of the largest. It counts several scores of kindred in its alliance, and it gets more and more and more every decade. They're very skilled warriors, and they love to expand. They're the biggest. They are kind of jack of all trades. They rely on their numbers, and they're the mercantile faction. Then we come to the Kronus Hegemony. Now, the Kronus Hegemony is the melee dwarf. They exist as a military superstate, with their kindred mustering some of the largest and, I say, the most aggressive armies. They love melee. They love getting in close, and personally, I mean, a common saying in the hegemony is there's no problem that cannot be solved with an axe, and that means in every aspect. They are vaunted warriors, and they are one of the youngest in terms of like recent, but they're the most expansionist because they've grown so much because they're military focused. So melee dwarf, melee dwarf. Then we come to the Trans-Hyperion Alliance. Now, these are interesting is that they have major territories both in far space and galactic core, like it's even out. They are the furthest traveled of all the leagues, and they're known for their prospects. They are known to going deep into their place, and they just explore everywhere. They're the explorators. They're ever mobile, and like because of that, they're often strung out and under strength, but they are no strangers to fighting against the odds. They are incredibly in-depth at understanding and scouting and trading. Like these are the explorators. They want to go out and find everywhere, and they're spread out all over the damn place. Then we come to the Ymir Conglomerate. Now, these are an elite league that is dedicated to the crafting of high quality technology. They have some of the best stuff ever. Now, these are the money men. They make the most money, so they make the best stuff, and they are renowned for two things. Like I said, material wealth, spectacular technologies. They have the most elite and equipped all brands. They're one of the smallest leagues, but they're definitely quality over quantity. And the stamp of the Ymir Conglomerate is known for quality. So if you like tanky boys and you like good stuff, basically, if you're a Salamanders fan, like me, you're gonna love these guys, which I indeed do. Then we come to the final one, which is the Urani-Surtr Regulars, or Regulates, but I like calling them Regulars, because, you know.
I do what I want, and I like what I do.
I just like it. These are interesting in that they have a reputation for survival against all odds. Courage and hardiness are just synonymous with them. Now, the reason why they prize these stoicism and self-reliance, they don't move from their particular area. They refuse to move for one reason, and things that we don't really know why. All they know is that they stay where they are, they stand there, and they endure. We don't know why they don't want to move. We don't know why. They're just like, hey, we stand here. We won't move, and this is it. Now, it's alluded to that there's some type of shenanigans going on, there's some major secret, but these guys are just stubborn. Like, if dwarfs call another dwarf stubborn, then you know it's like, oh my god. Now, let's wrap it all up. The Votann are space dwarfs, but they're 40k space dwarfs. They have, obviously, the Scandinavic and Nordic inspiration and the classic fantasy dwarf aspect, but they also have a lot of Greco-Roman influence to them in like their culture and how they believe and feel an idea. They have incredibly advanced technology. They are incredibly stubborn, but that stubbornness comes from a sense of, I believe this is what's best for the people around me. And you can change a dwarf's mind, it'll just take a long time. Most humans will probably be dead before that time, but they're very interesting in their place in the universe because people argue, what's their grimdark aspect? But their grimdark aspect is that they are on the verge of destruction because of what makes them who they are, and that's the Votann. If anyone, aside from the Tau, find out that they have Votann that are like AI, they're getting declared war on everyone. Everyone hates AI in 40k. Again, from the Votann or the Tau. So they are a sane, reasonable, rational race in 40k.
Abandon reason, no only war!
Which, it's not really conducive to one's well-being. Yet, the Votann, they don't care about that. They are hardy people. They love people. They love each other. They love family. And they're the quintessential dwarf. They work incredibly hard. They play incredibly hard. They're master craftsmen. And if you do something to earn the trust of a dwarf, it's gonna take a long time to get it. But if you get it, you are now family. This saying sums up the leagues very well, in my opinion. They don't have friends. They have family. You're either part of the kin or you are not part of the kin. And it shows that really well. Their aesthetic is gorgeous and beautiful, the way that it works, their cultural aspects to it, like everything. They're so unique to 40k, yet they still have that grimdark feel. Oh yeah, by the way, forgot to mention, their giant ancestor cores are kind of going crazy.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
Another reason why they're grimdark. You see, these were designed for, maybe like a few hundred years or 1,000 years. right? Yeah, like I said, the Votann are kind of going crazy because what happens is that, one, they're not designed to be lasted 20,000 years, give or take. But also, every time a kin dies, their consciousness or their personality is re-uploaded into the Votann. So not only do you have 20,000 years of wear and tear, you also have 20,000 years worth of dead dwarf kicking around in your skull. So there's that grimdark, if you were looking, that what makes them who they are, what's something that's so core and essential to their being is slowly being decayed and destroyed over time. There's your grimdark. Yeah, all in all, it's Space Dwarf. You're gonna love Space Dwarf. They look wonderful. They have this very, industrial, pragmatic look to them that I just love. But yeah, comment down below. Let me know which is your favorite alliance. Do you like the Space Dwarf? And if you don't like the Space Dwarf, then you like the Eldar. So yeah, I love Space Dwarves, man. They're just great. And there'll be plenty of other videos out. I'll have a few shorts about the different kin units up as well. Take a look at that. But if you're coming from there, hey, hi, thank you. I appreciate you and I love you. But I have been General Bradley 101. You have been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you all so very much for watching. Stay strong out there, boys and gals, and I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. Salutations, Rangers. General Bradley 1-1. Blah, 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 blah. What?